morning, good afternoon, good evening, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us on the first day of the Partner Power Summit, which follows the amazing international schools debates that we've just had at TSL. And so our discussion as you know, for the summit is climate justice. And every day of the summit, we are going to be delving into different types of climate justice. And today the topic is intergenerational and educational inequality, and how addressing those two types of inequality can help us possibly to combat the climate crisis. So we have a very special lineup today of panelists, and we're going to have a good conversation. And so shortly, I'm going to ask our panelists to make a few opening remarks before we have a conversation. But let me just very quickly say that we have today Tobi Ade-Odiachi. She is the UK representative of the Youth Climate Coalition, and she's also an engineering graduate, I believe. I think it's chemical engineering, but she can tell us more about that later. We also have Ambassador Emmanuel Ejiogu, who is the president of the Youth Orientation for Development organization in Nigeria, who works very closely with youth. And we also have our very special Grand Prize winner of the 2022 International Schools Essay Competition, who came top in a field of over 1,200 students this year. And he is going to share his thoughts on climate justice and intergenerational and educational inequality. So yes, without further ado, please could I, first of all, just invite Tobi Ade-Odiachi to join us. Welcome, Tobi.
Hi, thank you very much for the introduction. So my name is Tobi, and I'm one of the communications leads for the UK YCC, which is the UK's youth coalition. So I'm not the UK lead for Youth Climate Coalition, although it would be nice to be. I am an engineering graduate, you said, but mechanical engineering rather than chemical. But that was a few years ago now, I think 2018, so 4 years ago now. Currently, I work as a climate risk analyst, where I evaluate the exposures and vulnerabilities to climate risk for various entities. But yeah, excited to be talking to everybody here, and thank you for having me on.
Thank you, Tobi. Tobi, would you like to say any further opening remarks, or are you just happy to leave it like that as the start of the conversation?
I think I'm happy to leave it like that as the start of the conversation for now, and have everybody introduce themselves.
Very good. Yeah, we'll save some tough questions for you shortly. Great. Okay, so now could I invite Ambassador Emmanuel Ejiogu to join us? Welcome, Ambassador.
Okay, thank you so much. I am Ambassador Emmanuel Ejiogu, the president of Youth Orientation for Development, a United Nations educational, scientific, and cultural organization affiliated organization here in Nigeria. We've been promoting the ideals of UNESCO in education, in science, and in culture, and also we've been into creating awareness among young ones about climate change. And I'm so glad you having me here, and I believe we're going to have a successful deliberation today. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Ambassador. So you do your work with youth in a country that is one of the very few countries that has actually produced a Grand Prize winner twice in our International Schools Essay Competition. So Nigeria, I don't know, perhaps you're partly behind that with the schools that you work with, but we've already had 2 Grand Prize winners. And I must say that right from the start, when we launched the international school competitions in 2011, Nigeria has absolutely been pushing, well above its weight, globally, and has always been doing an amazing job on sustainability thinking. So yeah, so I don't know if that's, just down to the education system or down to YOD, or just perhaps down to the culture of Nigeria, where people maybe think in an interlinked way about issues and sustainability issues. But I'd like to hear from you later on that score, and also Tobi, because Tobi has a Nigerian background, I believe, as well. Actually, the Nigerian link continues because although Dhruvs comes from India, I believe he also lived in Nigeria for some time. So anyway, let me now give the floor to Dhruvs, 2022 Grand Prize winner of the essay competition.
Thank you, Karl. And let me just share my screen. Is it visible?
Yes, now it is.
Okay. Try to share. Yes, so it's visible now, the presentation?
Perfect.
Yes, it is. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you, Karl, TSL, honored panelists, and audience for making this conversation possible. I am Dhruvs from Uttarakhand, a hilly state in India, and I'm the TSL 2022 Essay Competition Grand Prize winner. Talking more about climate justice, which was the theme of this year's essay competition, and also the TSL Summit, I remember that when I first read about climate justice, the first thing that came to my mind was the plight of children living in slums. In my country, India, nearly 1 in 4 urban residents live in slums. Many of these slums form as a result of the migration of rural and disadvantaged communities, or even refugees, to urban centers in search for better life and livelihood. However, due to economic, political, or even xenophobic barriers, they're often pushed to the peripheries of cities, which are the least developed and are often outlets for the cities based in industrial dumping grounds. Trapped in these invisible cages, these communities, over several generations of perpetual poverty and illiteracy, assume roles such as rag picking to sustain themselves. These roles become so rigid that every child born into the community is expected to take up these jobs without any questions asked. Two complementary forces decide the destiny of these children. The first being the perpetual web of poverty, caste, and class, which prevents them from getting educated. And the second is the government, middlemen, and law enforcers that ensure that the system never changes. When we connect educational and intergenerational backwardness with the climate crisis, we get the perfect circuit for climate catastrophes. An example that comes to mind is Simapuri, a slum on the outskirts of Delhi that is populated by immigrants from Bangladesh that fled their ancestral farms due to flooding. And like many climate refugees, they were forced to live in makeshift tents of tin and plastics and resorted to rag picking for sustenance. In absence of any educational or generational wealth, their community was plunged deeper and deeper into the vicious cycle of poverty, which in turn is aggravated by climate changes like heat waves. It is not hard to imagine how exposed they are to climate hazards and how poorly they can adapt to these changes without climate literacy, money, or even food security. Slums are but one of many manifestations of educational and intergenerational inequality. In countries like the USA, social and educational backwardness accumulated over generations of African American communities due to segregation and poor funding also leaves their schools and neighborhoods more exposed to climate events like hurricanes, and in turn increase inequality. These unequal societies often have higher fertility rates, also a consequence of lack of education. It raises ethical questions about the rights of the future generations, many of which will be born into poorly educated societies where certain groups freely exploit resources. In the future, such slums and poor neighborhoods will increase, further pulling with themselves the childhood and dreams of millions of young people that might never see the clear skies, waters, and dense forests their ancestors lived. This is a snippet from Greta Thunberg's speech, and I think that it's a powerful message that many young people and many young people to come will probably have for us. And I believe that this is an important starter in our conversation. With these important contexts set, I would like to hand the virtual mic back to Karl and try to stop screen sharing.
Well, thank you very much, Dhruv. Thank you very much for that wonderful and thought-provoking presentation. Obviously, some very, serious and really quite disturbing facts that you've shared with us. I wonder, perhaps I could just start with you, Dhruv, and ask, when you put that together, were you thinking more of educational inequality, intergenerational, or other types of inequality?
When I first started to put together the essay on climate justice, I was thinking more about educational inequality, because that is, because being a school going person myself, I think that education has always helped us. You talked about Tobi being an engineering graduate, and I'm sure Ambassador Emmanuel would have some educational qualifications, and yourself as well. And this education in many ways has empowered us to come here onto this platform. And even this platform is functioning because of educated people, because people have invested their time and their skills. So I think that education is very important. And I consider it, and it is a fundamental right. So when I was first thinking about justice, I think that justice cannot start when certain communities are not given the chance to get educated.
Well, thank you, Dhruv. Yeah, and I must say that hearing young people like you, with clarity of thought really gives me hope, so, and I know I'm not the only one who believes that. Could I just now turn to another young person, Tobi Ade-Odiachi, who is doing amazing work with her social media education regarding climate change, and her background in engineering and in awareness raising regarding the climate crisis. So, Tobi, I wonder, when we say climate crisis, do you also think of educational inequality, or do you think largely of intergenerational inequality, young versus old?
Thanks for the question. And I think of both, because a lot of the things we know or learn are passed down to us. I think that's a given fact. Essentially, everything we learned in engineering or in school, Dhruv, is something that somebody else that was around before you found out and then thought it was crucial for you to know. And so because of that, there are certain gaps in what we know about climate change or its impacts, because the people that came before us, our parents or our teachers, didn't necessarily know, or even if they knew, probably you could say didn't really understand the impacts of. And so everything's happening now, and it's suddenly your responsibility, but you don't necessarily have the tools or access to the tools to begin to understand the problem. So it's you having to go out there and research for yourself. What does this mean? And again, it's also you or this generation and future generations that are going to have to deal with the impact. So find out how to solve these issues, or the breakdown in biodiversity, or the breakdown in climate crisis. So it goes hand in hand. When I think about it, I'm like, fine, there is an intergenerational inequality question here, because I'm having to work with a world that nobody has experienced, right? The amount of carbon in the atmosphere we've not seen before, the intensity of extreme weather events we've not seen before, and the impact on the political systems that we have, the economic systems that we have, nobody knows. So it's just out there, and you're having to figure it out as you go along. And then you think about the education inequality, and so fine, you don't know, so I don't know. And then I can't even use the the normal level of education, I can't assume that's constant for everybody. So now you're talking about the regional inequalities in education, like Drew mentioned, or even the local inequalities in education, because we all know that you could go to two schools 5 meters from each other and completely different things are being taught or communicated to the students. And so it's both. You're then trying, at least when I'm doing any of the posts on social media or trying to engage with people within my sphere of influence, I'm more trying to find out, okay, where are you in this journey? Right? Do you realize that there's a climate crisis? And if not, okay, we'll start somewhere with that. But you realize that there is a climate crisis? Do you know what tools to use? Do you know where to find out more information? Do you know your role in influencing how we mitigate or adapt to this climate crisis as well? So you're having to work out where everybody is in that story, and then how they understand it, or the kind of education they've received, or their relationship with other populations that may or may not understand it, influences quite deeply where they are in that journey.
Well, thank you, Toby. Yeah, thank you for clarifying that. And can I just stay with you for a second? Dhruv referenced young people feeling let down by, adults and older generations. And I believe that you take a very inclusive approach, to reaching out and engaging people and sort of not finger pointing. But can I just ask, if it's not rude, can I also ask you how you feel about adults and what sort of legacy they've given you, we've given you?
In a way, I sort of, what's the word? I sort of sympathize with adults, at least some, because the way I understand it, usually people want to give the best to the future, and they want to say, I worked hard so you could, at least parents that I know, I worked hard so that you could reap the benefits of my labor. Nobody wants to give you a sinking ship. And I think that's perhaps where some of the bitterness between generations comes in, because Drew's quite right. In Greta's speech, she says they failed us. And that's almost harsh to say, because in their opinions, they were doing the right thing. They were growing the economy. They were having industrial revolutions, production booms. And the one way they had to do it was to extract oil and burn it. That was the solution that they had for that problem. And then they gave us what we would consider to be a thriving market, right? Financial systems are booming. You can go around globalization. You can fly. You can go to space. That's amazing, right? But at the same time, it's like, well, you did it at expense of the planet. Well, we weren't thinking of the planet then. We were just thinking of all the developments we could make. And so it's a bit like, okay, from my perspective, I don't really feel like we can point the finger. I don't think that's helpful. One, I don't think it's necessary. I also don't think it's true, because without all those developments, we wouldn't have the lives that we do have. I certainly wouldn't be able to talk to you from where I am and reach out to everybody who's on the webinar. But then it's a case of understanding, okay, fine, we've done this. We have technological advancements. We did, emit tons of carbon into the air to get here. How do we move past that? And you're crucial in helping me understand that, because you understand how to move whole populations like this. You are the ones that did the tech boom, right? So you understand how to move people and how to get ideas through. So help me do that for this particular problem that I have to solve.
Thank you, Toby. I must say you are so inspiring, especially also you're studying engineering, so you're trying to now perhaps be part of the movement that's trying to rethink engineering and reinvent engineering in more positive ways. So can I just jump back quickly to Dhruv and say, Dhruv, you talked about what Greta said. How do you feel about adults and what sort of legacy we're leaving you?
Sorry, could you repeat the end? I think that my network just failed.
Oh, sure. Yes. Just a simple question. I was wondering how you feel about the legacy that adults have left you.
Oh, okay. So I listened to what Toby said, and I've heard Greta speaking, and many of the critics point out that she points fingers and she brings out points in a rather we can say rude way. But I think that the legacy that we have had, the past that we had, and as Tobi said, that our ancestors and our previous generations did not know that they were doing wrong to the society. But even then, I'm not really happy with what we have. Obviously, it's wrong to point fingers here, but as a young person, I would have appreciated if we had a more equal world, if we had less climate crisis, because essentially, even if we look at the action of governments today, many of them are dominated by people that are of the previous generation, especially in countries like India. Our entire cabinets are dominated by older generations that over the years, they have seen the impacts of their actions. And yet climate action is not the first thing that they think about. Despite now having the information, let's say that back then they did not have, but even now, a lot of them are delaying action. So even if we forgive them for what they did before, there's nothing to say that they did not know in the past few years. And there's ample proof, at least from past 15 or at least 10 years, that shows that climate crisis has already aggravated a lot. And even then, there's not a lot that they're doing. So in terms of my legacy, it's a bittersweet experience, I would say, where even if we consider them to be ignorant at first, there's no excuse for them not acting in the recent past.
Well, thank you, Dhruv and Tobi, for being so honest. Yeah, I really think what you're saying is incredibly fair-minded. And now I'd like to turn to Ambassador Ejiogu. And first of all, I'd just like to thank him for his patience while I chatted with the other panelists. I believe Ambassador Ejiogu, has had this concern. He has been, I suspect, in a minority of adults, who have wanted to bring these sorts of issues to the fore in education. So perhaps before we go into any specifics, Ambassador, could I just ask you a little bit about your own personal journey that brought you to this field of work that you have dedicated yourself to? Ambassador Ejiogu,
Sorry. I think I have to unmute. Sorry. Oh. Can you hear me now?
Yes, we can hear you now. Did you hear the question? Thank you.
Yes, I got the question right.
Okay, very good.
Yeah, I was just trying to explain. I mean, it dated back in 1995, 96. That was when I did my youth service. That is 1 year national youth service with the government of Nigeria after my higher institution. My background is business administration. I am a chartered administrator. But when I did my service, 1 year service, I served under Ambassador Segun Olushola, who happens to be the founder president of African Refugees Foundation. That was what brought me into the social work. I saw why I must get an organization that is youth-oriented, registered, so as to help a whole lot of the young people, because at that time, that is just over 25 years now, I was a youth then, and I saw that there is a vacuum between the adult and the youth, and I needed to just get something done at that time. And I have to start discussing with the ambassador, who of blessed memory now, and he gave me all necessary assistance that I need. And eventually I got the Youth Orientation for Development registered. Since then, we've been advocating for the youth, their rights, and also we've been involved in creating awareness on issues that has to do with their health, and also the issues of climate change. 10 years after our incorporation, we reached out to the United Nations. I was in New York, and on that note of our activities over the years, they had to get us registered as a UNESCO affiliated NGO. And ever since then, we've been working, promoting the ideals of UNESCO in education, science, and culture. And also involved in creating awareness on here in Nigeria, as you can.
Oh, I'm sorry about that. Ambassador, can you?
So there was a break. There was a break. Can you hear me now?
Yes, yes, we can. Yes, please go ahead.
Thank you so much. All right. So I think in a nutshell, our activities here have been with the youths in primary school, in secondary school, in tertiary institutions, and some of out of school youths. We've been working over the years with them. So this year 2022 is our 20 years of active social work in Nigeria.
Well, Ambassador, congratulations on the work that you are doing. And can I just, as we're focusing on Nigeria right now, can I just ask you, for how you feel in general about, the Nigerian school system and the curriculum? How well is it addressing education for sustainable development sorts of issues, the types that UNESCO are championing?
Hello.
Hello, Ambassador.
I'm here. Yes, can you hear me now?
Yes, it's a little bit breaking up, but perhaps you could try again.
I think that it would help if turns off the video.
Yes, yes. Thank you. I think he's turned off his video now. Perhaps, Ambassador, you could try again to speak.
Yeah. Okay, so I hope you can hear me now, right?
Yes, that's better. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Thank you so much. Thank you for that. So that is just how I came through the social work, and for the past, like as I said, 20 years we've been on this work, and I think it's good that we have to be brought into this platform, and I appreciate the organization in UK for putting this together, and I believe we'll have a whole lot to do together from this side, Nigeria. Thank you.
Well, thank you, Ambassador. We look forward to working with you and learning more about your wonderful work. Yes, and so Tobi, I think you sometimes go back to Nigeria as well. And so can you tell us a little bit about your background in terms of your education in Nigeria and in the UK and in your sort of sustainability learning journey?
So I grew up in Nigeria, and I lived there for the majority of my life. Yes, I left when I was 17 to come to the UK for A-levels and university. And in terms of the education, I'm guessing you're asking in respect of the climate crisis and environmentalism.
Yeah, I guess education for sustainable development in broad terms, yes?
Yes, so there it's very on the ground, which I love, don't get me wrong. You're able to experience it real time. So Nigeria has 2 seasons, wet and dry. And so depending on what season you're in, that's what you're gonna eat. So I think, rough example, mangoes are just on the precipice of the rainy season. You'd get mangoes, and that's what will be available. In the dry season, you get some African cherries or something else. And that would real time help you understand, okay, fine, certain foods are only available in certain places in certain seasons. Okay, so locality is really established there. But then other things such as how temperatures can affect sort of crops or animal livelihood, you would also experience. heavy rains equals floods. Dry seasons equals low amounts of crops. And this isn't things that they tell you in school. This is things that as a kid, you're seeing day in, day out, right? Because you're experiencing them on hand. There isn't necessarily a third person impact. It's a direct experience. But moving over to the UK, you're sort of removed from that experience. You don't necessarily get that real-time understanding that this weather impact here is going to relate to this. And it took me a while to realize it because I hadn't necessarily noticed that I knew. So I think I was talking to a friend one day and I was telling her how I was going to buy grapes in the middle of winter. And she just sort of stepped out for a bit and she was like, you can get grapes in December. And that was when I actually thought about it. And I was like, hold on, grapes are temperate, dry regions. You can't get them when it's cold. And that's when I began to actually think about, sort of the direct influences that we have or the direct triggers that tell us this is how the climate operates, this is how it affects you. So I guess I would say my learning in Nigeria up until that point was very on hand, on the ready. And then moving over to the UK, you need more thought because you're so removed from the process. Whereas back home, you would understand that the climate is getting worse. I mean, it's hot, there are floods every other week, the infrastructure can't keep up. Here, the infrastructure is there and it kind of protects you. So by the time you actually begin to directly feel some impacts, the severity is a lot higher. So those are the key differences that I noted.
Tobi, that's fascinating because I think what I'm understanding is that your multicultural background, your exposure to different perspectives, sort of helped to educate you and to open your eyes to different systems and different ways of being. Yeah, sorry, go ahead.
No, definitely. I think definitely. And just to say the way things are changing, I think I was speaking to a colleague of mine the other day and was talking about it was hot in the UK over the weekend. And we were talking about how the sort of clothes that we wear here, aren't built for temperatures of this range. When I was like, well, all I have are linens and all I have is pure cotton because, well, I'm from Nigeria. That's what I need to buy because it's so hot. So you're saying, yeah, exactly. My cultural and, multicultural background really influences a lot of decisions that I make. And that learning, if we go back to the education point, is something that's going to need to transfer over as the climate changes.
Yes, well, thank you, Tobi. So can I just invite, we're going to very soon bring in the audience. So can I invite audience members to start, putting questions in the chat, and then Kirsty can call you up, as we go. But before I turn to audience questions for the panel, could I just go back to Dhruv and say, Dhruv, you also had a multicultural, background. Can you describe that a little bit to us and tell us if you think that helped you to sort of helped your learning in sustainability?
Yes, so I was born in India, but as far as I can remember from early childhood, everything that I remember is from Nigeria. So, and I completed my elementary education from lower kindergarten to class 4 in Nigeria. And what Tobi said just now, it really opened my mind to another perspective because whatever she said about how sustainability was hands-on there, and the same is the case in India because many of the things that that we learn in books, they can actually be seen in real examples here. So I never really thought of sustainability education in that way. So thank you a lot, Tobi, for your comments. But, and I think that this might be a very big reason that there are a lot of winners in TSL from the Global South, especially from Nigeria, because when we think about how we are brought up in these countries, we are brought up in partnership with the nature, not shielded away from nature in another man-made environment. So that really helps us to connect the dots when we read the theory and when we look back at what we have already seen in nature. And when I was writing my essay, obviously this year, that was something that was always at the back of my mind. I was always referring to what real experiences I've had in India and the experiences that I've had in Nigeria. And I would say that even though our curriculums are not that focused on climate justice or climate change, I've studied in Nigeria, although it was an Indian school, so the curriculum was Indian, and I've studied in India, but I think that our curriculum is not really focused on climate change, but the real life examples and lessons that we learn by living very close to nature, not shielded away from nature, that really helps us to express ourselves, because whatever I'm saying today is not something I've read online, it's something that I've seen. So that I think is really important.
Thank you very much, Dhruv. So while we wait for questions from the audience, I have a question for all of the panelists, and it really is, I'd be very interested in your ideas on how youth can be better, how we can engage youth better, in terms of improving climate justice, but particularly on the intergenerational and the educational equality aspects. Who'd like to go first? Share their thoughts. Toby, can I pick on you? Thank you.
Yeah, that's fine. I think the first thing really is to get them talking. As we can see, Drew is a prime example. He's excellent. And you have full confidence that somebody who understands the complexities of the climate crisis, and not just the science, but the relationship and intersectionality with all the other systems that we have globally, is set up to be able to solve those problems. So I think the more we get the youth speaking to one another, the more they're able to sort of generate ideas, confide in each other, console each other, promote and support each other to be able to effect real change. And the way I understand it is, or the way I look at it is that if you look at any of the great leaders in the world, or any of the great entrepreneurs, they all have commonalities. All the great philosophers, they all knew each other. They went to the same schools. They grew up in the same in the same places, right? And so they were all able to bring each other up, and they were all able to feed off each other's ideas. They didn't operate in silos. They all had all this interconnection. So if we can promote that within the youth, then we're sure that we're going to get 5, 6, 10, 20,000 of them that will be able to effect real change because of the support that they've had from their peer group. And then again, when saying let's bridge the intergenerational gap, the older populations and the older generations have troves of wisdom that we are not exposed to by virtue of being young. And there's nothing wrong with that, but being able to communicate with them and drawing on their experience and their failures as well means that our solutions will be a lot of a higher quality. There's no need to reinvent the wheel. There's no need to make the same mistake twice. And there's an author that draws on this particularly well, is Robin Wall-Kimmerer in her book Braiding Sweetgrass, where she draws on indigenous people's myths and legends and histories and the ways that they do life. And she's like, they have steady ways of doing things that would help us today, address certain problems that they didn't have when they were in America, or in what we now know to be America. So that is one way I feel that we can draw on the youth and then older populations, intergenerational populations, to be able to bridge this gap and solve this problem.
Thank you, Toby, for your very inspiring, and hopeful words there. I do notice a few questions and hands being raised, but first I'm going to just invite the other two panelists for their thoughts. Who'd like to go next? Ambassador or Dhruv? Dhruv is unmuted.
Oh, I'm sorry, but can I go first?
Yes, of course.
So as Toby said, I think I completely agree with her that the previous generation can be brought and we can communicate with them. But also another important point that I talked about before is that the older generation of sometimes dominates the politics, and also there are a lot of older generations at the top of businesses, especially dynastic political parties and dynastic businesses. So one thing that can be done to reach out to them, and this is an example, I've had the opportunity to join a similar panel discussion as an attendee, and the panelist there was Jayatama Vikram Naike, who's the youth representative, I'm not really sure, the United Nations Secretary General Envoy on Youth. So what she said was that when she went back to Sri Lanka to talk to the head of a certain panchayat or a rural government in Sri Lanka, she went to them and she used all these really large words, intergenerational, educational, and really long words. And the people did not really listen to her. They heard her, but they did not listen to her. So that was when she realized that as youth, we also have to assume another role, which is kind of a bridge between the older generation and the ideals that we have today. So what she did was that she kind of modified her arguments and connected it more with Buddhism, which is the relationship, which is the religion of Sri Lanka. And that was when people really started to hear her. And a similar trend can be seen in India, because we have a lot of, in India, Hinduism is the dominant religion in a lot of parts of India. And when we connect our old stories about nature, and when we bring that up, that is something that really inspires the older generation, and they come forward to really talk. So as youth, I think that another role that we must assume is sort of like a translator, a bridge, and that can really help solve the intergenerational inequality. So I agree with Toby's points.
Thank you, Dhruv. Thank you very much. So before I invite Ambassador Ejiogu for his thoughts on the question, I note some of the comments in the chat are from an amazing teacher champion in Nigeria called Comfort Eti. And she is saying that I have observed that many school teachers in this part of the divide, and I'm thinking she possibly means the global south, but I'm not entirely sure. She says, many school teachers in this part of the divide are ignorant of sustainability education. Is it possible to know some of the UNESCO programs to get this to the grassroots? So actually, this is a question directly for Ambassador Ejiogu. I think we need to put you two in touch. Ambassador, could I ask you to
yes, I think
your video?
I can. Hello, can you hear me now?
We can hear you, but perhaps you could turn the video off. Thank you.
Okay, the video is off now. All right. So I hope you can hear me better now.
Yes.
All right. Taking that question, UNESCO is organized in such a way that every country that are member states of the United Nations have a commission. In Nigeria, we have Nigerian National Commission for UNESCO, and these commissions works directly with the Federal Ministry of Education. Now, working under directly with the Federal Ministry of Education, we have the avenue of getting some teachers involved in this issue, educating them in this issue of climate change. Now, in the UNESCO network, we have organizations that are members of the UNESCO clubs. The UNESCO clubs are clubs that are institutionalized in schools. These schools, we get the teachers informed about the issues of climate change. So for us in the UNESCO organization, I think it should be more work for us to ensure that this issue of climate change is spread over our schools, and the teachers are getting to know about the climate change justice. Now, on how we can get our youths involved, participate in the issue of climate change. As we know that the youths, the social media is one great tool in their hands. So we can get them, encourage them to do more on getting the news about the climate change issues, spread over through the social media handles. And not only that, we have a whole lot of organizations here in Nigeria that we are mentoring. And as we mentor them, we sound to them the importance of joining environmental organizations where they can help promote the issues of climate change. Some of them, we have them in clusters where we get them to just get involved in issues of campaign, and also limiting their use of plastic products. Because presently now in Nigeria, we are having the issues of flood. And when you think about this problem, is something that is caused by usage of some disposable plastics that are littering all over the canals and thereby causing flood. So I think for us here, we are doing all we can to ensure that our planet is protected using this creating this awareness on climate change. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Ambassador. And we can. Is it all right if we put Comfort Eti in touch with you after this program?
I didn't get well.
Oh, is it all right if we put the teacher, Comfort Eti, in touch with you directly?
That will be fine. That will be fine.
Thank you. Thank you very much. So the next question is to Daniel. Daniel, I wonder if we could call you up onto the screen and then you could ask your question directly.
Of course.
Go ahead,
My question was wondering what is the best way the youth and pretty much everyone that can how do we what is the best way we can raise our voices against the climate crisis to the government?
Panelists, how can youth's voices be better heard by the government? Dhruv, would you like to try to answer that?
Yes, I will try. I'm not sure if the answer would be possible everywhere, but I think that there's no one answer to this question because governments in different countries are at different levels of awareness, and at least where I live, the local government is not very helpful. I watched another panel by Sapna Ramji. She was the past Grand Prize winner, I believe. And what she said was that there are basically two groups of young people, one of them being really climate anxious, being outward. And I think that Ambassador Emmanuel said that they can use social media, which is becoming increasingly popular in all countries almost, to bring forth their voice. But there's another group of young people that are not really motivated to come forward. And I think that one of the reasons that they're not is because they're too busy with the educational framework, especially in the global south. If I talk about countries like India and Pakistan, our curriculums give no incentives to young people to come out and speak about climate crisis or any other global world challenge. So I think that if teachers, because the government is really up high there, and we have to start somewhere low. So if we could get our teachers to give young people some incentives to be able to talk. Obviously, the world is ours and we must act, but not everyone is able or willing to act. So if we could get more and more people to talk, because in any country, a voice is heard well when many people speak. So if you could encourage people around you, like Fridays for Future that Greta Thunberg did, that is a great way of reaching out to the government. Especially if people around you aren't that motivated to talk to the government about the climate crisis.
Great, thank you. And over to Tobi, who I wonder if she might say something about the Youth Climate Coalition as part of her answer.
Yeah, so definitely. So I was just about to give sort of like a mapping. I would say the first thing is to identify your sphere of influence. From what we know, and I think this is from studies, younger people resonate more with younger people. So they are more likely to act when somebody in their peer group has spoken to them. So mobilize on those. And as Dhruvs said, you have two groups. You have a group that is motivated by this and a group that is not motivated by this. And I don't know if anybody has ever watched kids get excited about a new song. You have one that is excited about the song, another one that doesn't really care, and the other one that is all right about the song, right? And as long as you have two of those who are mildly interested in this one song, that third person will convert. So you can use the forces you have in that one group that are completely mobilized to encourage the other group to come onto the journey. And this is where groups like the UK YCC come into play, because then you can find spaces where you have a group of people in your peer group or similar ages or similar experiences that are formed and then are able to talk about their interests regarding the climate or the environment together. And the bigger those groups are, and I'm not saying that the UK YCC is going to go and become 19 million kids. That's not the point, right? It's that we have one group, right, made of a couple of young people, and you have another group made of a couple of young people, another group made of a couple of young people, and eventually we have all the young people in the UK or in India and Pakistan or in Nigeria, and these different factions who are demanding the same things. And I think that's how you then get the attention of bigger forces such as governments or multilateral or organizations or NGOs or private companies. And then it's sort of finding the trigger for each one. So before the government gets involved, huge populations need to be affected, or they need to be affected by, let's say, some financial motivation. An NGO comes into play, or a private entity comes into play and says, okay, we need you to do this because this is a problem for us. And so it's finding those triggers and being able to use them. We're going to go to COP, right? We're going to make our presence known at COP for this particular country, or we're going to directly petition. I think the ambassador rightly said there are floods due to plastics in the canals. We're going to identify the main culprit of those plastics, and we're going to pressure them, right? And then in that time, by pressuring them, the government then becomes concerned because they're a main employer in that country. They're a main provider of revenue. And so it's identifying all those triggers, right? But also carrying your friends along, your mates along, anybody you're seeing that is not as motivated, trying to engage them, right? Get them interested and carrying them along, and then finding these groups and then pressuring all the trigger points.
Thank you, Tobi. I love the way that everything is an ecosystem for you. It's a system and it's all interlinked. It's so inspiring. Brilliant. So I'm afraid we only have time for one last question because the session is coming to an end.
I've got a question, if I may.
Oh, yes. Go ahead, Kirsty.
Thanks. It sort of builds on from what Tobi and Dhruvs have just been talking about. But I wonder, now we know how to mobilize young people's voices, how can we get the right people listening to these voices that need to be heard? I've been to lots of congresses, lots of events where we've had amazing groups of young people, such as the IUCN Youth Congress last year in September. I attended that, and it was young people from around the world getting together to have these really important conversations. But looking around the room, there were no CEOs, there were no government leaders, there were no political leaders, there were no business leaders there. And that was recognized by the audience and by some of the speakers that were participating. So how do you think we can get the people listening that really need to be listening? Is that possible?
Who'd like to answer Kirsty's easy question?
Sorry.
I'll let you unmute yourselves.
Is it about volume of numbers, do you think, Toby, or
I'll go. I think,
volume
and
of
this
voices?
is, I think this is something that I've had direct experience with. And again, is that sphere of influence. And without that, nothing happens. And it shouldn't be the case. So we have all these conversations with really intelligent people and really important people, and it doesn't get seen by, let's say, the right people. And I think that's when you have these key participants within your sphere of influence or within your group that play the most important part. And it's a question of access, which is the worst question as well. And it's a case of trying to get that important person in the room. Do you know them? And are you confident enough to challenge them and say, hey, I know you, and this is what I need from you right now to join this conversation, to have an opinion about it. And if you don't have that access, is again, how can you get it? And I think that's then going the other way of finding those trigger points and finding those influence factors that can get them in the room. And so that thing of, it's not volume that's going to do it, unless the volume is literally the whole country. Like we can see the protests in Sri Lanka, that certainly got somebody's attention. But it is having that one person who just has that person or proximity access to that other person that you need, and then pressing that trigger or getting another factor of influence. That's personally the way I think you can do it. But it is a very important question, a hard one to answer, really.
Thank you for trying.
Any other panelists want to have a go, or are you happy with Toby's answer?
I would just add that if anyone here ever gets the answer to this question, please do reach out to me, because this is something that I've really feel disgusted about, because there are people that want to speak, but then there's this empty room, or there are people that the people that are listening cannot just help apart from some little things that they can do. So Kirsty, that's a really difficult question, but thank you for asking it here. I hope that if this video is shared, and I hope that the right people find it.
Thank you, Dhruv. So Eva had a very similar question. So that ends our questions today. But actually, you know, Toby, you mentioned access. And again, access is all about inequality, unfortunately, isn't it? So it's almost like we've come back round the loop again. I guess we just have to keep chipping away, not lose faith, you know, keep doing all the amazing work that you're doing, all three of you. And if TSL can support in any way, you know, just get in touch, and we'd love to keep working with you. Yeah, brilliant. So a huge round of applause for our amazing panelists. Thank you for your inspiring, you know, thoughts, and thank you just for, you know, for being with us today. And I'd also just like to end by thanking the amazing TSL team. So we have Kirsty, who you just heard from, and Eva, and we also have Anthea and Natalie in the background, also helping to make things go smoothly. So that concludes day one of the Partner Power Summit. Please join us for day 2 and day 3 and day 4, where we will be delving into other aspects of climate justice. Thank you, everyone. Have a great day.